in the chat. I hope many of you saw the announcement that we just posted, a request for application and an RFA in the concurrent enrollment and Ascent Google group. So we now have a new round of funding for the concurrent enrollment expansion and innovation grant program. Now this one's a little bit different because we are using federal stimulus dollars, but on that website, you will see a link to register for the application webinar. So me and a couple of colleagues will be sharing information around the application, the evaluation, the rubric pieces, a timeline, and we'll highlight some of the differences between federal dollars and state dollars. So we hope many of you today will come by and check that out and ask us questions. That will be recorded. So if you can't make it next week, no worries. We'll put the link to the recording on that website again. The other announcement I wanted to make is that we do have 2 open seats on the Concurrent Enrollment Advisory Board. And so after today's conference, I will go back to the Google group and make sure to put those vacancy postings. We're looking for a representative from a charter school and also a representative from a low matriculation school district. So please take a look at that too. I hope many of you have attended those meetings. They're wonderful. The board is a great group of folks that are really looking to improving concurrent enrollment programs, such as Ascent and the new TREP program. So we welcome any of you to take a look and either have someone nominate you, nominate yourself, it doesn't matter. And if you have any questions at all, I'm gonna go ahead and put my email address in the chat. I hope you all have a wonderful conference today.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. I know a lot of folks have been waiting to hear a little bit more information about the grant. And I just learned about the new openings on the board as well. And if you're not interested in joining up, please join our meetings. They're quarterly. Our next one is in January. And if you check the Department of Ed website, you can find out more about that. Always good to have more across the state feedback in that group. So anyway, next, our plenary speaker, our keynote is Dr. Ryan Ross, and I'd like to introduce him. He is our Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and Equity and Inclusion at the Colorado Community College System Office. I've known Ryan for a long time. He used to work at Community College of Denver way back. And I know he's done some things and he might want to share more about that. But I really thought when we decided on our theme, he was the first person that popped into my mind because he does some great work in this space and puts on some great events. I'll let him share whatever he would like more about himself, but I will, I just really wanted him to frame our day. And thank you, Ryan, for being here. And I'll let you take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be with you, and funny story real quick before I get going. I had to take my son to school this morning, and he was asking me about my day, and I was like, oh, I got to do some stuff. I'm going to start hanging out with some concurrent enrollment educators, and he was like, Dad, are you speaking? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to speak a little bit. I'm going to share a couple of things. He was like, are you going to talk to them like you talk to me? And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, I have to listen to you because I'm your son, but they don't because they're not your son. So be brief, brother, be brief. So clearly, my son was telling me that I was long-winded. So I'm going to do my best not to do that this morning. I got a few moments to be with you and just want to share a couple of things. Whenever I have these kinds of conversations, there's 2 things I like to start with. The first thing is thank you. Thank you for who you are and what you do. When we think about the work that we do in community college and higher ed and dual enrollment, right? These aren't the kind of jobs that people grow up saying that, you know, this is what I'm going to do. I really believe that these jobs are callings. And I think that the people who end up doing this work are really special and they're superheroes, right? We're the kind of people who understand that it's important for people to actualize. It's important for people to reach their stars, if you will. And it takes a special person to help people go on that journey, right? We're not on this journey because we're getting rich. We're not on this journey because we're getting famous. We're not on this journey because, you know, it's going to get us on the front page of a magazine or anything like that. We're really in this work because we care about people. We're really in this work because we want to see students actualize and really achieve what it is they want to achieve. And we're also here because sometimes we have individuals or we work with folks who don't necessarily know what their dream is yet or haven't thought about what it means to actualize. And sometimes we give folks the voice and courage they need until they find it themselves. And so I just want to take a moment to say thank you for who you are and thank you for the work that you do, because it really, really matters. And I don't know that we hear it enough. I don't know that we are appreciated enough, but the reality is it's tremendous work, and you're tremendous people. And I'm just honored and privileged to be your colleague. And again, thank you for what you do. The second thing that I like to share is, I talked about you being superheroes, right? Well, every superhero has an origin story, right? Something that made them who they are. Spider-Man got bit by a spider. Batman, had a tragic event, fell in a cave, right? So on and so forth. But when I think about community colleges and I think about the work that we do, I believe our origin story really goes back to 1947 and President Truman's Commission on Higher Education, right? That commission offered two primary insights. The first one was improving college access and equity. The second one was expanding the role of community colleges, right? And so what those two things really mean is access and opportunity. Like, that's been our story. That's what we do. And equity has been a part of that conversation since that time. So the work that we do isn't new, right? It's really a part of our origin story. And that's funny because when I think about that, and then I think about higher education in general, I think about the evolution of the telephone, right? Humor me for a second. Right, if we go back to February 14th, 1876, that's when Alexander Graham Bell got the first patent on the telephone, right? And you can imagine what that phone looked like. It was, bulky, big. It was a machine of sorts, right? And then let's fast forward. We get to the 80s and we've got the big brick cell phone that you put on your shoulder. Some folks had the car cell phones, look like a brick, right? And then now, if we look at the cell phones that we all have right now, they're miniature computers that literally run our lives. There are calendars, there are computers, there are our way to shop, everything we can do in the palm of our hands. And so why does that matter? Why is that important? Right? When I think about that, I think about the work that had to go into the work and innovation that went into developing the telephone, right? We didn't just stop at Alexander Graham Bell's first design or the designs of others, right? Because there are other folks around that time who are also credited with having the similar idea. They just got to the patent office a little bit later, right? But that work didn't stop there. Every day, there was new thoughts about how do we communicate better? How do we connect people? How do we connect people better, right? And now we have the phones that we have right now. When I think about education, though, I think about one of the most important things that we have in society, right? The ability to teach and learn. And then I think about the innovation that's went into it, right? And sure, we've had some progress, right? Like you think about the first institutions being created in around 1650 to 1750, you get your Harvards and Yales, your Williams and Marys, right? You get your land grant acts in the 1860s. You get HBCUs, 1890. 1944, you get the GI Bill, things of that nature. 64 and 65, you get the Civil Rights Act. You also get Pell Grants in 1965. And then from the 60s through the 80s, you get the expansion of community colleges. And then also from the 60s to now, we see an increase in students of color and minority enrollments. And those are mostly in access institutions like community colleges, right? And so when I think about that timeline, what I don't really see is innovation. I see things that have to happen in order to grow, but I don't see innovation. I didn't really see innovation, in my opinion, until 2009. In 2009, with, as some of you are aware, House Bill 9/1319 and Senate Bill 9/285, dual enrollment was born, right? And when I think about dual enrollment and I think about our origin story, dual enrollment is doing just that, right? Dual enrollment is improving college access. It's improving equity, right? It's expanding the roles of community colleges. I mean, I think it's unfortunate that we were talking about that in 1947 and we didn't realize it until 2009 here in Colorado. But what that tells me is dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment is probably the fastest growing and maybe some would argue the only growing aspect of higher education. And so when we think about that, I think we have to slow down for a second and appreciate that dual enrollment is higher education's innovation. The work that you do is really helping move the story of higher education forward. Why is that important? It's important because as the terrain, as the land around higher education shifts and changes, right? The system of education as it was created hasn't changed much. And so dual enrollment is where we've seen the most change, and I think where we have the most impact. And I think that there are a few things that we can do to really take advantage of that. And I'll share just a couple of thoughts here before I get out of your way. So when we think about dual enrollment being the innovation of higher education, I think about what it has the ability to do, right? And first, you know, Tammy shared some really cool data, but I think we also have to think a little bit deeper than that data and disaggregate it to say, within this data set, who isn't thriving, right? How many students don't have access to concurrent enrollment or dual enrollment? How many districts and community colleges aren't connecting around dual enrollment to provide this opportunity that increases access, that increases equity and opportunities for students? I think that there's some really interesting numbers there and some interesting opportunity there. The second thing I think we have to think about is as we're thinking about the innovation of dual enrollment, is to think about how we're talking about it. What's the language around it, right? When I hear people talk about dual enrollment, I hear them talk about it as a program versus a tool. And I think there's a difference, right? When we talk about it as a program, we get things like MOUs and partnerships. You know, we get conversations like, well, we can offer it in certain places, but maybe not in other places because we don't have the right faculty or the right credentials or things like that, right? We talk about it very programmatically. I think if we begin to talk about it as a tool, right? When we talk about it as a tool, I think the equity conversation echoes louder, right? So let me give you an example. When we went into COVID and looking into the K-12 system, right? Computers became a tool, and suddenly every student had to have a computer, and districts moved hell and high water to make sure that that happened. Every student that went home who was learning remotely had a computer, right? We found the budget, we found the resources, we bartered, whatever we did, whatever we had to do to ensure that students had what they needed. Higher education the same way, right? What do students need? Whether it was resources, food, whatever the case was, we saw the challenge and we met it. And I think as we move forward with dual enrollment, we have to think about where we are in higher education, right? We started as institutions, community colleges in particular, started as institutions with the mission of access, right? And then, you know, a little bit later on down the line, the conversation grew a little bit and said, hey, it's not only access, it's also access and completion, right? And that's kind of where we are now. But now the conversation is shifting again to say, you know, it's not just access and completion, it's also access, completion, and what happens next. What's the outcome, right? What's happening once the students leave this experience? Who are they self-actualizing into be, and beginning to focus on what that outcome is to be sure that this experience is something that has actually helped individuals achieve their stars. And so as we begin to shift again and go into this kind of third evolution of who we are, right? Partnerships become much more important, right? And when we think about having a tool and having a partnership, you know, I think the important thing to remember is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what I mean by that is, you know, the strategy is, let's get an MOU, let's get a partner, let's hire some people and let's make sure they communicate and let's try to roll out this program, right? But when we talk about culture, right, now we're talking about how do we leverage this tool and how do we create this environment where every student thrives using this tool, right? And the other piece about culture is that we begin to realize that the relationships matter more than the MOUs. The relationship matters more than the policy or procedures, right? We've got these deep and meaningful relationships where people are willing to connect in a way that ensures the tool can be effective for everyone. And I think that's where this movement is going. And I think that's what you guys are doing. And that's what I encourage you to continue to do. When we talk about this as a tool, right, it's making sure that every student has access to a full and robust dual enrollment experience. Like it's awesome that some kids finish high school and they just have 9 credits, right? Like that's amazing. But what if every student finished and they had an associate's degree or they had that certificate that allowed them to go to work, right? What would that look like? That would be a game-changing experience, not only for the students, but for higher education and our K-12 partnerships. And I think when we think about it that way, maybe the conversation changes on how we are implementing the work that we do, right? Maybe it's looking at incentivizing how we hire on both ends to ensure that every teacher can teach dual enrollment. So every student in every district, in every school, in every neighborhood can actually take advantage of it. And so we can truly honor the equity aspect of what dual enrollment really provides. I think one of the last things that we have to do is we have to slow down and listen to the students. When Tammy asked me to be here today, one of the first things I did was I went over to a couple of high schools where we have concurrent enrollment at, and I talked to a couple of students and I just said, what does concurrent enrollment, what does dual enrollment mean to you, right? And the answers were, they didn't surprise me, right? But, they just reminded me that concurrent enrollment, dual enrollment is so much more than a jump start to college, right? One student said that, without the dual enrollment experience, he wouldn't have even thought about college because it wasn't for him. It wasn't for his family. Like those weren't conversations that they were having, not because he didn't believe he was capable, but because there was no access to the conversation. Nobody was talking about it. And now suddenly, not only is he talking about it, but he's in it. And so now he's sharing that story with his siblings about how he's going to go to college and it's going to be more affordable and it's going to take a shorter amount of time, right? Listening to students talk about how, now all of a sudden they feel like they can go and access a STEM career, right? Because they've got a little extra time and a safe place to take some of the science classes, and with professors that they know, and they're not necessarily on a college campus yet. Like these are some of the things, some of the non-tangibles of concurrent enrollment, of the work that you're doing. And I think those are some of the things that we have to celebrate and put at the forefront of the conversations as we begin to, as we continue to have the conversation rather around how do we continue to provide access and equity within this work? How do we ensure that every student who takes advantage of dual enrollment thrives in a way that allows them to not only experience access, not only experience completion, but realize a goal and an outcome? That's where I think we are. I think that's the direction that we're heading. That's the work that you're doing. I think that as we move forward, we just have to be more intentional about taking our conversations about the work beneath the surface level, right? The surface level work is awesome. The data shows that we're doing tremendous work. But what happens if we just went a little deeper? How much greater would that work be? How much more impact would that work have? And how much more amazing would that be for every student? So again, thank you so much for who you are. On behalf of Chancellor Joe Garcia, welcome. Have a tremendous day of learning. Thank you for allowing me to share space with you. Hopefully I've said something that resonates or that's helpful or something to get you thinking. or maybe just something to remind you of the superhero you are. So again, thank you for having me, and I wish you well. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate those words, looking at the bigger picture. Instead of just focusing on those numbers, what else can we be doing, and making sure everyone has access. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. So we're a couple minutes early, but I think that's okay. We're going to go ahead and go to our sessions here. And, if you need a quick break, grab another cup of coffee, and you'll have time to do that. So as we transition, I think Marty is going to put up the breakout rooms, if I'm not mistaken. And they are on your, Marty, are we just doing it from the document? Or are you going to open them up on here?
Everybody should see a breakout rooms button in their Zoom toolbar. Click that and select the breakout room for 9 a.m. that you would like to join. Hover over the number in the right-hand column and click join.
So you click your name.
No. Over the session title, click join. If anybody's having trouble, stick around and ask for help in the chat.
Good morning. This is Sherry Kova over at ACC. One thing we've discovered that can be a challenge with this is that if you don't have an updated version of Zoom, it doesn't always show those breakout rooms.
We'd be happy to assign people to breakout rooms if they don't have that button.
Oh, perfect. Thank you for coordinating that.
Hi, I actually don't think I have the breakout room option. So if someone could put me in.
So you're going to go into partnerships.
Yeah.
Let me find you.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're Madeline, right?
Yes, that's right.
There you are. And I'm going to assign you to the partnership as the foundation. Does anybody else need help?
Thank you for taking your day. And I want to go ahead and introduce Michelle and the session she is going to run this morning. So thank you, Michelle, for also joining us.
Good morning, everyone. I would also, Michelle Pacheco, Associate Dean of Concurrent Enrollment here at Community College of Aurora. I also want to introduce my co-facilitator, co-presenter, Dave West, who's with Aurora Public Schools.
Good morning, everyone. Michelle, thank you. My name is Dave West with Aurora Public Schools. I coordinate college career success and counseling services, and it is an honor and a pleasure to be with all of you this morning, talking about our partnership.
All right, I'm just going to go ahead and pull up our presentation. One second.
While Michelle is pulling that up, I would simply indicate to everyone, we are not very formal presenters. So if at any time you have a question with something we're discussing, by all means, feel free to put it in the chat and or unmute yourselves, and we'll be glad to address that question as it's coming up.
One second. It's so weird because I keep going to my screen too. Dave, do you want to share from your end? Do you have it
Oh,
pulled
yeah,
up?
I was like, I can try sharing. I can see when you're pulling it up, just informationally. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Michelle, I'll drive while you chat.
Okay, perfect. So we really appreciate the opportunity, like Dave mentioned, to be able to have the ability to be here with all of you today. Dave and I both came on similarly about the same time, almost